Well, it isn't even fully negotiated yet, so don't listen to the losers who are critical about something they know nothing about. Unlike those before me who should have solved this problem many years ago, I don't make bad deals.
که ما به دنبال صلاح هسته‌ای نیستیم، ما به دنبال ناآرامی در منطقه نیستیم.
So I figured we should discuss the alleged deal that is currently being reached between America and Iran, and I waited about 24 hours to talk about this for a specific reason, because I think we've learned throughout the course of this conflict to have delayed gratification about certain things, not immediately rush to these conclusions that the war is over or it's over for us. It's going to be World War III. This is really bad. No, let's calm down. Let's have a rational, level-headed take about it, which I'm so glad that social media did yesterday and did not completely lose their minds. That's, of course, sarcastic. A bunch of people were claiming early on, based on unsubstantiated reports, that Trump has surrendered the Strait of Hormuz to Iran and received absolutely no nuclear concessions. And then we're allegedly finding out since it looks like the opposite is true, like they just completely made up. That was Iranian state propaganda from the beginning. Who knows? But here's what I'll say before we break this down and get into all the full details, is that if this reported deal is what is signed and implemented, then I would say it's a good deal and it's a good way to wrap up this conflict. We succeeded. Now, the caveat there is, first and foremost, we have to make sure the ink actually meets the paper, because we've been teased about this several times before. But then even furthermore, if it is reached, whether the Iranians especially actually follow it, which is going to be another thing to sit there and watch. Now, there are some built-in ways, allegedly, if this is the deal, that Trump is going to enforce that the Iranians follow it, so that's good. But that's why I'm going to say, look, we're reacting to rumors right now. We're speculating. I'll give you my takes, and some of you have been asking for it. But let's also understand, we have to see how it's actually implemented and plays out. That's the big thing. So let's not overreact on either side, but we will talk about it. So what is this alleged deal? Why are the initial reports wrong? Why do I think if it is followed correctly, it's a good deal? Let's break this down. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. That is the best way to support our work, and it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And that said, here is what President Trump put out yesterday. You may remember throughout the weekend, he's locked down in the White House. Some lunatic even showed up and tried to assassinate him while he was making this deal. But the full statement reads, "I am in the Oval Office at the White House, where we just had a very good call with a bunch of the Arab leaders of countries like Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, Pakistan, Turkey, Egypt, that whole part of the world, Bahrain, etc., concerning the Islamic Republic of Iran and all things related to a memorandum of understanding pertaining to peace." So he's stating that an agreement has largely been negotiated subject to finalization between the United States of America, Iran, and the various other countries as listed. Now, Trump since has come out and stated that he's also not rushing into this deal. So I encourage people, just calm down, okay? Don't really overreact in either direction. Let's see how this goes. But separately, I had a call with Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel, which likewise went very well. Final aspects and details of the deal are currently being discussed and will be announced shortly. In addition to many other elements of the agreement, the Strait of Hormuz will be opened, which is another thing I'm looking at, and certainly we need. Okay, the global economy needs relief. Gas prices obviously need to come down. That is maybe the biggest political hurdle that Trump is facing, really, when it comes to Iran. It's not even Iran's military capacity in itself. It's the domestic backlash, which is a valid conversation there. But we've also seen, of course, many times where the Iranians said the Strait of Hormuz was open and then it was not. And then the next day they change their minds and start bombing people. So that's another thing to watch. But we'll explain maybe the reasons that there could be optimism to believe this deal might be a little bit more permanent. I'm not saying that definitively. I'm not promising that. I'm just saying why this time is a little bit different, maybe, perhaps, but not guaranteed for sure. Absolutely. So, again, we heard early reports that Trump had just surrendered the uranium issue, or he's going to let Iran have the Strait of Hormuz because the Iranians were refusing to move on that. Now, ever since we've heard reporting out of sources like the New York Times and Reuters, take that as you will too, by the way. That's why I feel almost guilty for speculating, but people have been asking me what my thoughts are on this. Okay, so allegedly, U.S. officials, according to New York Times, say Iran has agreed to give up its highly enriched uranium under the deal, which President Trump said will soon be announced. Iran has yet to make any public statements on the supposed agreement, which I find to be pretty telling because usually these guys come out and immediately, oftentimes, deny things that perhaps they even agreed to. So the fact that Iran is noticeably kind of silent on Western media reporting that these nuclear concessions were given, at the very least, is interesting. It still doesn't guarantee that they're going to follow it, but maybe says something that there could be some truth in that, and that perhaps, again, the people who were in total freakout mode should just relax and see where this goes. Now, Pakistan, likewise, you may remember they are the third country mediator, oftentimes at the center of these talks. Likewise, they came to back up this media reporting, claiming that Iran has agreed to hand over enriched uranium in the Trump-backed deal. And from what we understand, here are the full details. So, first of all, the alleged deal that they're looking to reach right now would include a 60-day ceasefire extension renewed by mutual consent. So that's just what they're going to do to figure out the rest of this. Now, again, what Reuters and others and Axios are also saying right now is that the Strait of Hormuz is to be reopened with no tolls, no IRGC, fake control, or terrorism, and Iran would clear the mines it had deployed. So initially, people were saying Trump had handed the strait over to Iran. Ever since the reports we're hearing there are not true, and obviously that's very important. I would argue that's the two biggest things we want and need out of this deal. Iran doesn't control the strait, and the nuclear concessions we came for. Now, the rest, I think there's room to be flexible on, but those are probably the two 100% this cannot be allowed to happen. So, Strait of Hormuz opening, contrary to months of them saying that they were going to control it. Again, if that happens, if they follow it, if that's implemented, that is a win, and it does go to show once again all the people who said Iran was walking away with the strait and they had no leverage. There was no reason for them to give it away with the control they never even had in the first place. Well, then explain what's going on here, right? I mean, we have said, I don't think Iran's control over the strait is actually real. They can commit terrorism, but can they meaningfully push back if other global powers like the United States have a problem with it and want to do something? I don't exactly think so. Really, what they've been holding over our head this whole time is just the possibility that they might launch ballistic missiles at, say, oil fields in the Middle East, and then we have a 10-year energy crisis, right? But fundamentally, what it is like forms of terrorism. That's all they have on their side. But okay, so again, if the strait's open, that's good news, undeniably. In exchange, the U.S. would lift its blockade and issue sanctions relief that would allow Iran to start selling oil freely. That seems to make relative sense, right? If once this is over, you lift the blockade. I don't actually have a problem with that. Now, Trump's principle, though, and why I say, people are questioning, why can you trust the Iranians? You can't. Obviously, you can't. They've broken a million agreements. They broke the freaking ceasefire that we're in right now. Let's not forget about that. But his principle is called relief for performance. Iran doesn't get stuff until a final nuclear deal is verifiably implemented. So obviously, we're not going to be stupid and walk into this saying, oh, Iran, we're just going to trust you to follow the deal. No, Iran doesn't get the stuff it wants until they give us what we want. Now, Iran must commit in the Memorandum of Understanding to never pursue nuclear weapons and to negotiate suspending enrichment and removing its uranium stockpile. Iran reportedly gave verbal commitments through mediators on how far it would go. U.S. forces would stay in the region for the full 60 days, withdrawing only if a final deal is reached. So this is another thing I said. Trump is just withdrawing the troops. He's totally surrendering. According to what we now understand, that's actually not true. But it would also explicitly end the Israel-Hezbollah war in Lebanon. Whatever, right? Arab and Muslim leaders, including the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Egypt, and Pakistan, all support the deal, which is interesting, but apparently Israel is not that happy about that. So basically, the Gulf states say, this is a good deal, we should take it. Israel doesn't want us to take the deal. That's hilarious because all of the Thomas Massie supporters told me that Trump is controlled by Israel and he just does everything that Israel wants. How funny how that actually doesn't work that way. And likewise, I saw yesterday a bunch of the, hawks, we could call them, the neocons, really tearing into Trump, saying he completely surrendered to the Iranians, all this stuff. And I said to these people, look, first and foremost, let's see what the final deal actually looks like. You're reacting to unsubstantiated reports, which I guess to an extent we are as well, but we're also doing it in a very level-headed manner, right? Let's see what happens. And then, secondly, I saw a lot of people claiming that, well, Trump betrayed the protesters or he needs to go all the way, to which I say, okay, but you also understand what our strategic objective here actually is and like the promises Trump is trying to keep when he said he was going in. Okay. First and foremost, this primarily has been a lot for him about Iran not having a nuclear weapon. That's first and foremost. It is true that he encouraged the protesters and said he would come help them out. I would point out, and as we've been saying, he did do that. He's left a massive power vacuum behind in Iran. I remain committed to this day on my take that I don't think the Iranian regime as it currently exists is all that long for this world. You cannot, as a country, lose that much of your top leadership and just expect the governing competency or credibility or the mandate, right, to remain all that stable or the same or in place. I think it's inevitably going to be the case that either eventually the people overthrow the government, right? Iran is a country with massive domestic problems that we have exacerbated, but were existing before. They have 100% inflation, flailing economy. Let's not forget they were facing protests back in January for a specific reason. But furthermore, beyond that, I think either they're kind of in this position where they're going to either have to pursue, say, the Venezuela option, which is reform, drop the fanaticism, drop the ideology for the sense of self-preservation, or they'll basically implode in on themselves, right? But the regime, in many ways, even if it's rallying strong right now, and I know people are saying that, oh, well, Iran is stronger than ever. Why? Because they felt this sense of martyrdom for about a month and got angry about that, and that's why they're united. Yeah, let's see how long that honeymoon lasts. The analogy I've often made is the right wing with Charlie Kirk. Yeah, for the first month after Charlie Kirk was assassinated, the right wing was more unified than ever. Notice how ever since we've devolved into a bunch of infighting, I hate to admit it, but that's kind of how this stuff works, right? When you lose leaders, yes, immediately it is something that enrages and unifies you. Long term, though, the lack of leadership really gets to you because guess what? Even if maybe ideas underline these things, ideas alone do not sustain countries, governments, or political movements. You need competent people actually at the helm leading those things. And if you don't have that leadership, which Iran really doesn't have, nobody knows who's in charge of the country. We've witnessed coups and power struggles already take place. I would argue, even if it wasn't our specific explicit goal, to the people saying, oh, well, we need to have total regime change in Iran. How do you know that story is done? And by the way, on the flip side, okay, so what exactly do you want us to do? Do these people want us to have a full boots on the ground invasion of Iran? Do they want it to be a forever war? I mean, I understand why Israel and Netanyahu want that, especially because Netanyahu basically is sort of in this hard political position because whenever he leaves office, he probably will be facing, indictments or some court cases and stuff like that. So I get that. I get why Israel wants that. I maintain America, contrary to what these people claim, our president is not controlled by Israel. He's making his own sovereign decisions. But even furthermore, right, it's like, okay, so again, I understand where you're coming from, but if we can achieve all of these things that are being listed out, with a deal being made, and that remains to be seen, right? If they break the deal, it's very simple. Then we enforce them breaking the deal. Then they find out. It's really like that. There's a reason why U.S. forces are staying in the region. There's a reason why Trump is basically creating this principle of like there has to be performance, right? Only relief for performance, right? In the sense of sanctions. That's all true. But if we can achieve at the end of this, we got the nuclear concessions we wanted. They hand over their nuclear material. And maybe by the way, they don't control the Strait of Hormuz, so that's big for the global economy. And perhaps maybe with sanctions relief, much like we saw in Venezuela, I know this one maybe is a long shot, but if they sort of integrate more into the rest of the world, if they become more of a quote unquote normal country, whether that's the Islamic regime in name or something new, then I would say in that sense also we have affected regime change, right? I mean, are you going to say in Venezuela we didn't affect regime change just because the Socialist Party's still in control? I would doubt that, right? But okay, admittedly in Iran, that attempt has been harder, right? Their leadership is a lot more stubborn. They have more fanatics in power. That's true. But that's why I've said, okay, they're in wartime right now. They're in that honeymoon phase. They're rallied up. There's a sense of martyrdom. Let's see where this goes in a couple of months to a couple of years. I remain committed. I think the Iran that we knew fundamentally is going to change long term, but you can hold me accountable to that. Let's see what happens on that front. But just what I'd like to point out. So the Gulf states happy about this. They're not fond of Iran at all. They've attacked Iran in many cases, but maybe not quite as hawkish against Iran as Netanyahu and Israel. There you have it. And I'm not surprised that Trump's foreign policy aligns more with the Gulf states than Israel because What I've tried to explain to people is that, Trump is neither a neocon nor a libertarian isolationist. He has sort of this third rail foreign policy where he's willing to use the military, he's willing to attack, but he also committed that, no forever wars. And so he's trying to basically balance two ideologies at once. He says he doesn't want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. He's still doing that. He also promised to keep America out of forever prolonged quagmires like we saw in 2003. To me, again, we'll see if it succeeds, but I can't fault him for trying right now. I think the approach he's taking actually makes perfect sense if you really align with what Trump's foreign policy is and not say the hardcore libertarians or the neocons, right? Because if you think Trump is either of those things, he's not. And that's why, for example, a lot of the neocons, like Mark Levin is one example, they've been the biggest cheerleaders of Trump during this war. But then when he tries to take the diplomacy angle because he wants to get it over with, he doesn't want to have us there forever, suddenly he's up in arms and suddenly he's attacking the president after being the biggest loyalist, right? We have really understood what Trump's angle is the entire time. And that's why I haven't really freaked out on either side of it. I was like, okay, will it succeed? We'll find out. But I understand what he's trying to do here, right? I perfectly understand the rationale. But a lot of people, I guess, who never understood Trump or his philosophy clinged on or clinged against him for certain reasons. And that's why right now, I guess you could say they're kind of confused to an extent. The libertarians are learning, the Massey supporters are learning, oh, what the heck, Trump's not actually controlled by everything Israel wants. The neocons are learning, oh, Trump's not one of us. He didn't want to put boots on the ground in Iran or attack their infrastructure, and then they start attacking infrastructure in the Gulf states, and then we have this 10-year recession and energy crisis problem on our hands. Yeah, it makes sense to me, right? But anyways, so, as noted here, the most revealing detail is that Netanyahu raised concerns about the Lebanon ceasefire on the call with Trump and allegedly was overridden. So, very interesting detail to people who claim a certain thing about his control over Israel. But the U.S. official's quote says everything. Bibi has his domestic considerations, which is basically the fact he wants to stay in office for as long as possible to avoid these legal troubles that might come for him, right? But Trump has the interest of the U.S. and the global economy to think about, which is also completely true, right? We need to get gas prices under control, and the midterms still matter in my eyes, right? I know people have certain philosophies about this, but that's why it's a balancing act. I'm not saying that, Trump should never try to handle geopolitical issues because they're important and they define legacy. They might define our country in 20 years. That's all true. At the same time, we still have to do our best to try to defeat the left, which is the top enemy of this country. It's not Iran. It's not China. Those are problems. But so that's why you got to juggle both sides of this. And if this all succeeds, then Trump deserves credit. I'm just going to remain firm in that stance, and people can disagree or whatever, but that's where I am on that. So anyways, maybe for the people though who don't want Trump to rush into a deal, I agree with you as well. That's why I said delayed gratification. We got to see what happens. He did put out this statement today basically indicating, okay, there's a deal being made, but I'm not signing it tomorrow. Okay, so don't believe everything you read effectively. So here's what he stated though. One of the worst deals ever made by our country was the Iran nuclear deal put forth and signed by Barack Obama and the rank amateurs of the Obama administration. It was a direct path to Iran developing a nuclear weapon. Not so with a transaction currently being negotiated with Iran by the Trump administration, the exact opposite, in fact. And yes, if Iran hands over their nuclear material, what are they going to make a nuclear weapon with? So that's something on the level we didn't necessarily see under the Obama deal. The Obama deal was basically, we promise we're never going to make nuclear stuff, right? Yeah, so the negotiations are proceeding in an orderly and constructive manner. And I've also informed my representatives not to rush into a deal in that time is on our side, which I think to an extent is also true, because the more this blockade goes, the worse Iran's getting hit by that. You don't want to especially lift that without getting what you want in return. So that's completely fair. For now, the blockade will remain in full force and effect until an agreement is reached, certified, and signed. Both sides must take their time and get it right. There can be no mistakes. Our relationship with Iran is becoming a much more professional and productive one. They must understand, however, they cannot develop or procure a nuclear weapon or bomb. I would like to think thus far all of the countries of the Middle East for their support and cooperation, which will be further enhanced and strengthened by their joining the nations of the historic Abraham Accords. And who knows, perhaps the Islamic Republic of Iran would like to join as well. So basically saying, look, if we can get this sorted out, we could have some form of peace in the Middle East. And obviously that's a good thing. Now, Scott Jennings apparently just had a phone call, according to him, with a senior Trump administration official. And here's what we understand at the moment. Here's at least what Scott Jennings is saying. First and foremost, the U.S. is not giving Iranians money for nothing. All speculation and propaganda to the contrary is false. Some hardline elements of Iran's IRGC have pushed fake stories and propaganda to try to kill this negotiation. So the idea we're just giving them pallets of cash like the Obama administration, according to Scott Jennings at least, not true. Iran deal also is not done, 95%, but still haggling over some language. No deal being signed today, maybe a few more days before this is done. So we'll also have to see, what the final deal actually looks like. Furthermore, Iran will not get any money or sanctions relief up front. So to people who say, oh, well, he just gave Iran everything they wanted without actually any concessions. You didn't even know we still don't know what's in the deal, but from what we currently understand, that's not going to be the case. Furthermore, Iran must turn over their nuclear stockpile to get anything. The U.S. position is that failure to meet deal commitments means Iran gets nothing. Well, there you go. So they have to hold up their end of the bargain before we do anything, right? There you go. Long-term, U.S. objective is preventing Iran from having a nuclear weapon. The initial deal is to reestablish free flow of commerce by opening the Strait of Hormuz, which we've established. They will not be tolling by our understanding. Now, we've seen them, again, backtrack on that many times, but at least that's what's going to be on the piece of paper here. Okay, so that's good. Deal one, open the Strait of Hormuz, give the world economy some breathing room. Help us against Democrats in the midterms, by the way, obviously. Iran agrees to give up the enriched uranium, and then step two would be to get the nuclear material turned over. Only then can Iran get sanctions relief. So there you go. Bottom line, the goal is to make a deal that lowers costs for Americans, calms world energy markets, and guarantees that Iranians cannot have a nuclear weapon over the long term. We aren't there yet. Iran takes forever to get you a response, even on small things. That's true, but we are close, although it could take a few days. So there you go. If we get everything we are demanding, this is going to be a historic deal, according to this senior administration official, which I think we've established also is, yes, true. We're getting what we want. We're getting what we asked for, but they also said not prepared to do no deal at all if Iran will try to do a bad deal. And the deal could still fall apart. But if a deal is reached, very senior administration officials expect to take part in a signing ceremony of some sort. Iran has agreed in principle to the framework, but there's still a couple points the U.S. isn't satisfied with. So we'll see what happens on that. But yeah, I mean, again, the structure of this seems to be good. And the only people probably criticizing that are perhaps just people who want us to invade and be there for another 10 years. I don't know. But for me, where I'm standing, you don't want them to have a nuclear weapon. You don't want them to control the Strait of Hormuz. I actually think, too, it would probably benefit if we could normalize Iran to some extent, right? Like, they have to actually stop acting like a pariah. That part is true. But if they do that, okay, fine. We'll open the economy, the world economy to them, okay? It's better to collectively make money together than to be like fighting each other. That's absolutely true. So for me, I'm looking at this and I'm saying this is by and large what we should want, and as it pertains to regime change, Trump, let's not forget, famously said to the protesters, rise up and take back your own country as well, which is to say, yes, we did you a huge favor here, right? This regime is weaker than it's ever been. Don't let them sit there and tell you they have all the cards, they have the leverage, they're stronger than ever. There's no signs in reality that's true, okay? There's a huge power vacuum there waiting. But at the end of the day, it's not the U.S.'s job, and it's never been the U.S.'s job to overthrow bad regimes because they're bad. In the process of what we've done, we've helped those people. But yes, at the end of the day, it is still the job of the Iranian people to overthrow the government if that's what they want for themselves. Okay, we're not going to get into the Iraq situation again, where we're going to go in there and repeat the same issue where we're occupying a country and the people don't really want us there, et cetera, right? But also it's very costly to us, all those things. Okay, like that's just not something I'm interested in. That's never been my issue here either with Iran. It's like, no, they need to stop threatening commerce. They need to, stop basically acting as this proxy military ally of China. And the nuclear issue they're holding over our heads is the problem that Iran poses to America. Okay. There are other regional interests. There are domestic interests. There's also other problems with the regime. But, we also have to ask the question of how many problems can we solve ourselves? If we get the nuclear deal, if we get what we want, then we've done our job. At a certain point, right? It's like, are you going to, at a certain point, you have to stop attacking the Trump administration for not helping the protesters adequately. Like, I don't know what you want at this point. No, at a certain point, it's also the job of the people of that country to rise up and overthrow their country, overthrow their government as well. Okay. And I understand how parts of the Persian diaspora feel. A lot of them are not happy over this or whatever because they wanted to see the regime go down. Okay, I get that, but still, at the end of the day, the job of the US government is not to do that for you, right? Like, we've done a big favor here, sure, but it's still our job to act in our interest. Our interest is not whether bad guys are in charge of Iran or not, even though I remain committed to the idea. I don't think long-term they really will be. But no, our job here the whole time has been eliminate the nuclear threat, eliminate, economic threats that are facing the global trade in China and all these geopolitical issues. That's our thing, okay? And trust me, I know where you're coming from because I'm Vietnamese. Okay, I'm descendant of that diaspora, at least on a certain part of my side of my family, and so I get that. But I never have sat here and demanded, oh, America needs to go back and finish the job in Vietnam. They abandoned us or something. They need to go overthrow the communist government in 2026. It's like, no, America tried to do the South Vietnamese a great service. In the end, it didn't work out for a number of different reasons, but. Okay, like America tried to help, they did their thing, but it's also not the job of America to, consider the plight of every person around the world as their top issue or concern. Yeah, we can go in and help, but, especially in a case like South Vietnam, it's like when, to an extent, there's just a certain writing on the wall that, okay, America, like the political capital for America to stay here doesn't exist anymore. It is what it is. Yeah, I get it. Like, I totally understand it. And it's like, yeah, if in that case, at a certain point, it does become the responsibility of the people of those countries to really express what they want from their government, So anyways, that's just where I stand because I've been seeing a lot of those comments. And I just feel like, again, first of all, we've done a great service to the protesters. And secondly, define specifically what we should do then. I guess that would be my challenge, right? So do we need to go invade and overthrow the whole government? Should we attack the infrastructure then and cause this MAD situation in the Middle East where like all the oil wells are blowing up all over the place? Because the problem obviously with doing that is if Iran fires ballistic missiles back at, say, Saudi oil fields and stuff like that, and they're all on fire across the world, that stuff's going to take decades to rebuild. And so the oil problem we're facing right now is just going to get worse, and it's going to last for years instead of months. So, that it would probably bring down the Iranian regime. I don't deny that, but that's also the cost of doing that type of business. Or you invade and you get stuck there like 2003, and yeah, eventually we'd win, but at what cost? You have to take multiple factors into consideration, I guess what I would say there, right? It's like, yeah, would it be a good thing for the world for us to just finish the job right now in Iran? Sure. I guess it was a good thing principally that we overthrew Saddam, but you look at the downstream consequences and you know how that stuff goes. So, let's see if it works out for Trump in this case. I'm not saying it will, but what I am saying is that if it does, I think he deserves serious credit. I don't think he conceded, honestly, a single thing. If this is what the final deal looks like, it is a massive win for the United States and the United States. I don't care what Israel thinks or neocons think or members of the, fanatical members of the Persian diaspora think. That is a win for the United States. And that's what I'm concerned about. Like that is my thing. Okay. Take it or leave it is the way I'll put it. Now, let's see if Iran follows it. Still have my doubts, still have my skepticism. We all do. So I'm not here to celebrate right now. I'm just saying, if this is the deal, it is a good deal. And, it wouldn't maybe surprise me if Trump manages to get this done because we've seen him do it before, right? But then even secondly, I think it's also been the case that maybe communication within Iran is bad. They don't have the leverage that a lot of people think. No, I mean, they have been grandstanding throughout most of these negotiations, wasting time. But, maybe if certain members of the government see the writing on the wall, then we're in luck, okay? So that's where I stand. Anyways, that said, guys, let me know your thoughts on this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.